Xenosystems. This is Nick Land's book, and reading Nick Land is a joy, a treat. It's something that will challenge you. I spent most of my time while reading this book copying and pasting entire paragraphs or multiple paragraphs and putting them into Grok with the prompt, WTF is Nick Land trying to say here? And then it unpacks it. Land is one of the most dense writers that I've ever had the pleasure of reading. And this book is an absolute joy. It's not, I won't say it's like an easy read, because he does write so dense. However, it's the kind of read that you want to chew on for a long time, and you want to really think about the things that he's saying, because Land is not fighting in the trenches that everyone else is. He's not arguing the merits of Democrats versus Republicans or democracy versus communism. He is far zoomed out and talking about things at a higher level, a higher dimension than we're typically used to. And
You said so.
Bitcoin is such a core part of the things that he talks about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's in the trenches, but I would say it's like a concentric circle of trenches that's further back from the front lines. So Xenosystems is a curated collection of entries from his blog of the same name, I believe, from 2012 to 2017. It's kind of roughly centered around this idea of neo-reaction. So you're right that neo-reaction as like a political philosophy is kind of, and we'll talk about this, a meta politics. So it's beyond the front lines. If you're in the trenches, Democrat, Republican, even conservative, liberal, there's a row behind that of increasing abstraction about what it even means to have a political view. And that's kind of where neo-reaction situates itself as a framework for views. And I want to say it's a concentric circle of trenches, because when he was writing this blog, it was a time of 2012, 2017, hashing out this idea of neo-reaction. Now it's kind of in the air. You hear Nick Land mentioned in the same breath as a lot of modern politics with, you would say, the rise of the alt-right, but this is like prefiguring a lot of that. This comes before Trump, and a lot of people use it to explain a lot of what Trump was able to piggyback on, but this is
and
not
he exclusively distances himself from the alt-right.
Yes,
right?
he does in this. Yeah.
Like
So
very, very vehemently.
explicitly,
Sure.
yeah. And just like in those terms, a distancing, definitely. It's a populist movement to neo-reaction, which is like an anti-populist movement. It's against, we're going to see a critique of democracy here because it is anti-populist. Yeah, like alt-right could be a populist expression, maybe, of some of the same sources of discontent that motivate neo-reaction, but they're divergent stances. Yeah. No, it is. You're totally right. There's a density to it that he's a philosopher by training, continental philosophy. So that's like a certain trend, a certain school of philosophy that within the realm of philosophy, we might say there's analytic and continental. And analytic is the type that maybe a lot of people are used to, where it's all about like, be as clear as you can, and proceed through like to clarify a concept, kind of through like maybe a Socratic ring of like increasing movement towards a notion where you subtract away all the inessential. Whereas he's going to talk about his view of philosophy here, which is more of a stimulus to thought as a way to get us thinking. And I just wanted to also know that this is his most accessible work too. When he was writing for the blog, he was writing for somewhat of a popular audience, at least trying to have dialogue with people who were incredibly intelligent, Curtis Yarvin, Michael Anisimov, these other people, but they weren't, like they weren't in the same strand of philosophy that he was. And he kind of pulls back, I think. This is if you want to get into Nick Land, this is where you start, I think, Xenosystems. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you going to start us? Are there terms that we should? I mean, because like reading through like cybernetic and the cathedral and these things.
So cybernetics, I wasn't, as far as terms though, I think that's how we're going to structure this conversation. Perfect. This is, again, kind of a curation of blog entries. Lomez, the editor, through Passage Press, does a fantastic job of it's not pure chronology of blog entries. There's a cumulative nature where you learn concepts as you go along that are employed in later blog entries, and even Lomez has taken the effort to kind of put in the forefront, in the kind of at the beginning, essays that if you read through it like chronologically, if you read the book chronologically, you're going to learn vocab that's going to help out. And this whole thing, Land creates a vocabulary because you're going to talk about a new thing and you use the old words, you're going to be captured in a sense by old ways of thinking. And so Land is going to rebuild up a vocabulary, and not just him, the people he's in dialogue with. We'll talk about the cathedral, what that means. This was a notion that Curtis Yarvin, as mentioned, Bug created, and it's one that Land employs. So yeah, yeah,
he addresses that very explicitly, the language, in that, you know, language is not sufficient to convey ideas that are, I mean, like there are, the English language lacks the ability to communicate certain types of things, and other languages lack those abilities. And he mentions that, like, you know, mathematics quickly gets rid of language and devolves into symbols
yeah.
that are, I guess, more universal or something. But like, I remember having a discussion with somebody, a Chinese person who was saying, like, in Chinese, there's like, I don't know, there's like 15 different ways to say love, and each of them means like a different thing,
Hmm.
you know? And there's like, I mean, you can have like love for an object, love for a family member, romantic love, all this
Yeah.
stuff. And so, um, it's from that place that we're starting this conversation, which is that we're using language to describe something that language is not sufficient for. And so we're fighting against the current to begin with, I think.
Yeah.
And trying to, th- the more I read this, the more it is just constantly reminding yourself to remove yourself from the box. You're in a system. You need to be outside of the system to analyze the
Yeah.
system. So,
Here's a couple of quotes on language. I sent you one over on Twitter as we were discussing this. That one is: language is not a neutral conveyor of infinite communicative possibility, but an intelligence box. It is to be counted among the traps to be escaped. And then in that vein, language is good only for language games, and among these trust games are the most irredeemably stupid. So it's like language is going to put us, it's going to be an intelligence box. It's going to box us into a place, and we're not going to be able to go further. And we need to go further toward the outside, which we're going to talk about too, as as a place of possibility and darkness, a place beyond language, but a place that also is going to be an ultimate refuge from a lot of the traps that we're going to find. You mentioned the word cybernetics. I didn't have that as a separate topic. He kind of, that's one of the words he uses as presumed knowledge. And cybernetics was this study, I take it, of like a feedback system. So cybernetics is the way that a system maintains itself in stability. Like, imagine a stable system, all of the flows within that system that regulate each other so that the system stays the same, or there's two ways that a system breaks down. He says it either becomes an explosion or a trap. The cybernetic system either has some sort of reinforcement feedback mechanism that causes it to accelerate out of control, or it gets caught in a sort of stagnant stability and degenerates.
a key to this is that it's positive feedback, right? Because I think he makes the distinction that there's a difference between negative and positive feedback, and that cybernetics is a positive feedback system. And that I feel like I read, and maybe I'm imagining it, but I feel like I read this in one of the blogs that was like, cybernetics specifically deals with positive feedback, which is basically that you are, basically, like, you do something and you get an empirical result, and that result is either, oh, this is good, I do more of it, or this is bad, I do something else. And so the only outcome is positive. Either you move further in the direction that you want to go, or you start moving in the direction that you want to go because the thing that you were doing was moving you in a different direction. And so I don't really know. I was kind of hoping you could explain that to me.
Let's
Um,
just jump in with the first
yeah.
concept because it is a, I think cybernetic dynamic And again, if you characterize these things as positive or negative, you're already building in a value judgment. And I think that's one of the things that land philosophy does is a lot of the reason why people will say that land is nihilist is because they think that there's an endorsement in certain parts of it rather than simply a description of reality. I think what
Right.
land is doing a lot of times is using a very kind of brilliant and distinctive prose style to describe reality in a new sort of way to make it apparent because reality is always everywhere about us. We become inured to it, it becomes invisible. If you don't redescribe it in a way that makes it salient, then it fades into the background. And I think a lot of
Yeah.
what he's doing is just describing dynamics in a way that makes them notable to us again that reality is incredibly strange. What's going on is incredibly strange. If we attend to reality as it is, the dynamics, and don't turn away from certain kind of fearful truths, then you're going to see things operating at a level that may be concerning. Some will call it nihilist. Again, others are simply going to call it like looking reality straight in the jaws. But so one of the first concepts we get is the degenerative ratchet. And so what's a ratchet?
Ratchet is a tool that gives you leverage to turn something, I guess, to like tighten or loosen.
Yeah, so but the nature of a ratchet though is it clicks easily in one direction. You turn
Yes.
a ratchet,
It
like
only goes one
it
direction.
only goes one
Yep.
direction. You try to flip it, it's like it catches then.
Yep.
Each time you move forward, it's a click. You try to move it back, it doesn't go further, but it moves easily forward to the next click. And so that a degenerative ratchet then um so reversal becomes impossible. It's going to be the state through democratic institutions becomes a degenerative ratchet in which you only have the growth of the state. You can always move forward easily to another click in the growth of Leviathan. You can never move backwards. Things like the expansive franchise. Once you extend the vote, you can't then rescind the vote to a new population. They're going to keep on voting. If we move the vote down to the 16-year-olds have it, it would be tough to then disenfranchise 16-year-olds, whether it was good or bad to enfranchise them in the first place. That's beside the point. It's a ratchet. It moves forward easily but doesn't move backwards. The welfare state is that same way. You extend an entitlement, it becomes very difficult to resend an entitlement. People expect it. It becomes the thing that if you take away an entitlement, this people are like, you cruel, incompassionate person, what are you doing taking away this thing that we're owed?
Yeah, there's nothing more temporary, nothing more permanent than a temporary government program.
Exactly.
Right.
It's a degenerative ratchet. Makes backward movement impossible. Keep going forward until the system breaks. That's maybe that cybernetic explosion, um, that dynamic of a feedback where you're always can easily go in one direction, you can't go backwards. Progressivism then writ large is a degenerative ratchet. Democratization, again, once you democratize, you can't go back. Welfare systems, immigration. Once you have a bunch of mass immigration, it becomes, as we're seeing, very difficult politically, socially to then
Yeah.
deport a bunch of people. You can't go backward. You can only slow immigration flows or maybe stop them periodically. You can never really go backwards once you've had an explosive immigration flow. It's a degenerative ratchet. One that Bitcoiners will be familiar with, macroeconomic politicized money. To quote Land, easing is easy, tightening is terrifying. Rollback unattempted since Jackson in the mid 19th century. So quantitative easing is easy. Everybody loves the new money. Tightening, the periods of austerity, nobody wants that, right? And so all neo-reactionary problems are going to go back in a sense to this degenerative ratchet. It is the problem where progressivism is the easiest thing to do in the world through increased immigration flows, increased entitlement programs, increased and more loose democratization, increase of the money supply. All these things are very easy to do, but to try to pull that ratchet backwards, you can't do it. Yeah, so that's the first concept. It's going to be at the core of a lot of this, the negative, or just the way that neo-reaction is looking at the world. It's going to look at a lot of systems as degenerative ratchets.
Degenerative ratchets. Okay. So
If,
basically, you start moving in a direction, you can never go back.
if that direction, being the progressive expansion of the state.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this again, like all of this is a dialogue that Nick Land is having with other blogs at the time about new reaction. It's fun because there's not a lot of like political philosophy maybe is something that happens in the ivory halls of academia or it's something that happened in the distant past. We read like of Thomas Hobbes and John Locke and about the our forefathers in the Federalist Paper having these dialogues. The cool thing about Xenosystems is this was a public dialogue happening about political philosophy. Anybody could contribute and help in developing this idea. It's kind of similar to when we read one of the Natalie Smolinski's episode or essay on the towards an anthropological theory of money. She has that Twitter exchange between David Graeber and Nick Szabo and some others. And we saw the same thing, due to the decentralized nature of our communication systems now, public philosophizing happens in this thinking happens in public. Anybody can contribute, and it becomes a record of accumulated thought.
Yeah.
And
And
that's
in real time.
in real
Like it's
time. Yeah.
happening. You don't have to wait for somebody to publish a book and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. There's no peer review interposing itself between what is said. Someone has a thought and they say it. There's no intermediating institution. So the next idea then is the trichotomy. This is really cool because I haven't just given a neat definition of what neoreaction is, and we're not going to give a neat definition throughout Xenosystems. We're going to get, again, Land is thinking in public at this time, trying to build up what is neoreaction. It's like you have a name for an idea, you have an idea, but you don't yet know the parameters or boundaries of your idea. And as he's talking, he's kind of, the way I see it, in reflecting on this, reading these blog entries, is he has kind of the intellectual discipline to see from a distance even the debate that's happening in the moment, to begin to categorize it and to say, okay, we have this school of thought within neoreaction saying this thing, we have this school of thought saying this other thing. What's the unifying thread? How do they stand in relation to each other? And so there were three dominant threads that he found. He calls it the trichotomy, three branches of neoreaction. Religious traditionalist is the first one, ethnic nationalist is the second one, and then capitalist. So
Theonomists, Nazis, and money grubbers.
You can give negative appellations to all of them. Yeah. The theonomists, ethno-nationalists, and then techno-commercialists, which Land really counts himself in that third strand,
Techno-commercialist.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that I think it was interesting, you frame this really well, is that he's not, because he was doing this in real time, he doesn't just come out and say, this is what neo-reactionary is. It's more like, it's almost like we're watching somebody create a sculpture in front of us with a hammer and a chisel and chip away and go, I don't know what it is, but I know it's not this. And I know it's not this. And I know it's not this. And he's just moving around and really addressing all of these edge cases that pop up as the discussion takes place in real time. So.
And seeing what's essential. As you take away a chip from the sculpture, you've taken away something that's not essential, and you've revealed something that you can't take away. Like, okay, now the face is emerging, the brow is here. That's essential to the sculpture. And one of the things that is essential in these three branches, every one of them is a form of spontaneous order. And every one of them also, it has a relationship to fate. It's a sort of deterministic, fatalistic strand or way of thinking. For example, theonomists, those that believe in God and have an order around God as like the principle of operation, like providence within that's a spontaneous ordering outside of your control. God's will is, people can have this passivity to them. It's all unfolding according to God's will. It's also fatalist. No matter what happens, the truly religious person in most traditions is going to say, that's fine. The bigger picture is we're moving towards a future that I know is ordained by a principle of faith that I call providence, the will of God, something like that. For ethno-nationalists, that's genetics and heredity. Evolution, in a word, is like a way of spontaneously ordering. We start as disorganized matter and we become these organisms, humans, right? We've evolved through time, increasing order, derived simply through the operation of the laws of evolution, selection and fitness. These types of things have generated an order through a certain sort of providence or fate. There were like laws or rules that led to an outcome that nobody controlled. So you have a spontaneous order arising through evolution in the same way that the religious person says spontaneous order happens due to the will of God, something like that. And then third, techno-commercialists, there's a word here that's kind of jargony, but catalaxy. And that's just the spontaneous order that happens from free market choices. Within a free market, you have spontaneous orders emerge. I mean, that's how free market systems organize. Nobody says the price of this good is going to be this certain price. That price is converged upon through all of these different free agents, free market actors, wheeling and dealing in the market. That's how corporations arise. That's how products are made. There is some design that happens, by the corporation, but the larger market structure is just this thing of creative destruction where whole industries are destroyed, new ones arise outside of anyone's conscious choosing.
And catalaxy is a more accurate term for where we commonly say economy, right? Yeah, I think he
We could
makes
say
that,
that. Yeah.
says that, which
Yeah,
is like
for sure.
economy is derived more from the idea of responsible household management, or responsible economics is like derived from like this idea of responsible household management.
Yeah.
But catalaxy is truly what we're thinking of when we think of the economy, or we think of like the global market or something like
Yes.
that. It is that it's just a better word to use, I guess, for that. It's more descriptive of what's actually happening.
Yeah, and more focusing on when you think of an economy, you might some people's idea might be that the government controls the economy, they minister it, um, and they set the price of goods, and if there wasn't for the government to structure it, nothing would happen or something like that. But Cadillacs is really the idea that that's not necessary. That again, markets are self-ordering, and so the government needs to step aside to truly allow the flourishing of whatever is to come through the market, whatever is to arise because of it.
The term techno commercialism, I think, is interesting because not because, but it. I heard Jack Mallers on an interview when I was driving back here. I heard him say that humans are basically um, like tool makers who have figured out how to commercialize sunshine. Like, because literally everything we have derives somehow of either an asteroid impacting, which is very small, but
Mhm.
everything else is like sun sun derived. All the like
Yeah,
even like an animal is is derived from the sun, because without the sun the animal wouldn't exist, and the things. So
yeah,
it's really interesting, I think, to think like, again, this is just going back to how land is just, he's just so zoomed out. He's just
yeah,
so, like you say, he's in one of the more, he's in the outside circle of all these concentric circles, I guess, maybe.
yeah.
Or maybe he's in the inside. I don't know.
No, so his Twitter handle at the time was called outsideness, and the outside, capital O, we're going to talk about what that is, but it's like it's not just one of the concentric circles. It's once you get out of the circles and there are no circles, it's a place of I would say like chaos. But it's funny that you say the sun, like everything derives from the sun. Is that what Mahler's was saying? So
Yeah,
yeah,
or sunlight. Yeah.
sunlight. One of Land's earlier books was called The Thirsts for Annihilation, on virulent nihilism, something like that. It was a monograph on George Bataille, who's a philosopher, and his idea was that preceding the real economy or the economy that we have was the solar economy based on absolute excess. Like the sun is always splashing down on us this energy which we can only use a fraction of, and that's the true economy. So it's all of the like Land's intellectual genealogy is incredibly interesting. We're talking about neo-reaction, it's maybe coming out as if we're talking about like a right-wing view. Wing is not the right word. I don't think he rejected the phrase right accelerationism, which is what some people kind of situated it as. But again, right only to the extent that that is one of the ways you're going to capture a certain set of views that are about the description of reality rather than the subjugation of reality to our view of what reality should be, which is what progressivism is. It's like this. It's like our belief
Yeah.
of the way things should be predominates over the way that things are.
What
We
is
live in that
he talks
fantasy.
about it as like, imposing morals over intelligence, I think
Yeah,
is
that
like,
type of thing. Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Where it's like, you know, if we were to do the thing that is the smart thing, or we would let just Cadillacsy have its way,
Yeah.
then we would just let it be. But because we're moral and we have, subjectively defined, this is the fairness that we want, fairness. And that's like such a, now you have to think about what that means.
Yeah.
Like fairness really, the way that it's used is meant to, say redistribution. Like
Mhm.
we're going to take either resources or wealth or opportunity or, something from someone who in the Cadillacsy, in the order that we have, has reached it, and we're going to take it and we're going to give it to somebody else. Or we're going to make it harder for them to get it and easier for somebody else to get it. So, yeah, it's really interesting because we end up getting to this idea of how, the morals, like all of this stuff is a break on capitalism, which is this like alien system that is just marching towards this um, inevitable place where it leaves humanity behind and becomes
Mhm.
artificial, intelligent, robotic, autonomous capital, and we're pets
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So sorry, I apologize if I like walked over some of the things
No,
that
no.
you're going to talk about, but
I mean, it's a good summary of what we've already talked about. Again, each of the three strands, the trichotomy of neo-reaction, these three subcurrents within theonomy, ethno-nationalism, techno-commercialism, each built on an idea of fate or destiny. And underlying all of that is the idea that the capital is autonomous and seeking its own expression, and we are a brake on it, and we are a monkey that it is feeding to get us to do what it wants
mhm,
to get to like he has a whole essay called Monkey Business that talks about this that we'll
yep,
get to, but the idea is that capital is some sort of thing that we don't truly understand, a dynamic all its own, and it's giving the monkeys a banana so that we'll build it. And
yeah.
I mean that's yeah, but
Yeah,
see,
capitalism. It's fascinating the way you talk. Like I've never heard of the term capital be described the way he is, because he's not talking about it as a term. He's like, we think of capital as like, oh, it's it's a bank account, or it's a building, or something like that. And he's like, no, no, no. Like capital, like you say, it's this, it's its own like intelligence
yes,
that is seeking expression, and all of the things that we are doing as humanity, where we are imposing our morals, is that we are just slowing capitalism from reaching its expression.
slowing but also a necessary bootstrap, like the monkeys
Yeah.
were needed to birth the thing
Yep.
that goes beyond the monkeys.
Yep.
So we talked about neo-reaction as a critique of democracy, and so let's pull that together here. Democracy is supposedly like a positive feedback mechanism where the populace observes the government functioning and then evaluates them and say, I like the way that this administration is working. They're efficiently doing things. They're getting done what needs to be done. And so then people render a vote on the system as it is to either say, keep going, guys, you're doing great, or to pull back and get new leaders. So that's like the positive vision of democracy, where people evaluate the results of the administration and then say yay or nay to readjust the system as needed. But Land's point is that the feedback mechanism is corrupted. Instead of measuring public opinion, it modifies or creates that which it seeks to measure. That's how democracy actually functions. Once you begin, once you design a system to achieve a result, you begin then to corrupt it so that the result, the system doesn't. It's kind of like if you have a thermostat that's trying to measure how warm the environment is, but instead of actually measuring it, it just perverts or corrupts so that it begins to convince you that it's warm or it's cold.
Hmm.
Instead of actually measuring what it is, it like
It's just the number changes, but the temperature doesn't,
Yeah,
kind of thing,
it
right?
ceases to be it ceases to be a reality sensor and becomes a reality creator.
Yeah,
It becomes within democracy, public opinion is a reality that is formed and managed, not something that is measured.
yeah.
Yeah,
He talks about how the word propaganda was taken and just changed to public relations, and that
yes,
like we think of propaganda as, oh, that's something other people do, or like now I think we kind of like recognize that it's actively happening within our sphere, but everybody's also so into their own corner that they believe, most times they believe their propaganda over the other side's propaganda. And then if you can take the time to move into the middle, you look to both and you're like, this is absolutely ridiculous. But so democracy, it's doomed to fail because it matures by distancing itself from feedback as it continues to refine its ability to do public relations or do propaganda. So
to create the feedback it
yeah,
wants.
the party that achieves
Yeah,
success is the one that most effectively tells the people it is doing their wishes after defining for them the wishes it once done.
yes.
And there was another.
Land says if you want the government to listen to you, then you have to expect it to tell you what to say.
That's exactly, yeah. That was the one that I was going to find. If you
Yeah,
want the government to listen to you, then you have to expect it to tell you what to say. That's
yeah,
like, and so this is where, um, again, just reading this book, I had so many times where I just stopped and I was like, I want to keep reading because I wanted to get through it. But then I was like, I have to think about this for a while because this is the point where he's starting to help us understand that democracy and communism, socialism, like they are not two sides. They're not different. They are just different on the spectrum. They're not they're just kind of like different versions of each other. It's not like one or the other. Are that they're completely separate. Like they're just breaks upon capitalism and they're ways of achieving those breaks in different ways.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
yep. Um, democracy, as you begin to so if you corrupt the feedback mechanism, if you go from being a reality sensor to a reality creator, and this it's not difficult to imagine why this happens, right? If in a democracy, a party comes to power, they see that their power depends on getting a positive vote in the polls. So they have like two options. They can do a really good job and get people to vote for them, or they can just make people think that they're doing a good job or define the result that they achieve, whatever it is, as a good job,
Yeah.
create a new reality. So it's like the feedback mechanism, the sensor becomes the thing that creates the reality that it senses because it determines that's an easier thing to do than trying to actually do a good job is to create the perception of a good job, to mold everybody's reality so that they're like, this is how things should be. I feel good. I feel good. I'm going to be, a renter in my house until I'm in my 60s. I'm not going to have a family, but things seem pretty good because they're telling me things seem pretty good.
Yeah.
And so,
I'm gonna eat poison food and I'm gonna wear
yeah,
poison clothing and I'm not gonna go into the sun and I'm gonna yeah. There's another one. Democracy is thus, strictly speaking, a production of collective insanity or disassociation from reality.
yeah,
And this is another where um, some people are gonna you could, if you came into this with like emotions, you could like get upset at this or take offense to this or whatever. But what Land is trying to do is he's trying to say, this is actually like, um, like I hand you a plate and I tell you that it's a plate, but you don't speak my language. And so I have to describe what that thing does. And so he is, even though we speak the same language, he is describing to us what democracy does because we don't understand it. Like what democracy really does is it doesn't take the will of the people and put it into power and create this representative government. What it takes is it takes um, this giving of power to people who then trade resources for popularity. They then trade wealth for popularity. Oftentimes most of the time they trade other people's wealth for
Yeah.
popularity, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, there's a really good documentary called Century of the Self, by, the name escapes me right now. It's free on Twitter. It's about Edward Bernays and the rise after World War II of public relations as a field of study, a science, a practice, whatever. And it's all about that, about how opinion is consensus is manufactured, and how the reality again that the system says that it's trying to measure something it's actually creating.
Yeah,
So
Edward Bernays is the reason why women smoke Virginia Slims.
the freedom torches,
And
I think,
freedom, yeah, Torches of Freedom,
torches of
yeah,
freedom. Yeah.
I can't remember what else, but yeah, I
So
heard.
what are some of the consequences of this? So one is that quality of government suffers. To quote Land, lacking feedback from anything but its own experiments in mind control, quality of government collapses. Again, the government's not trying to measure if it's actually doing a good job, it's trying to convince everybody that it is. And so you have a degenerative ratchet that occurs, you have a degeneration of good politics and governance into bad. Also, culture is corrupted. Everything is now politicized. Everything is something that the government, if you want to stay in power in a democracy, you have to control public opinion. So everything is a parameter that needs to be controlled. Art becomes politicized. Culture becomes politicized. To quote Land, any thought is now dissent if it is not positively aligned with society's leading political direction. To think outside the propaganda apparatus, the cathedral, we're going to talk about that next, to think outside of that is to attack the government. Culture is then destroyed. All thoughts have to be in line with how the government is defining reality. Their picture, their definition of reality has to be complete and total. If you have a thought that is different than that, it is inherently dissent and something that needs to be controlled and managed.
This is something that I understand. I can feel it, but I was trying to I was struggling to connect the dots between how government or democracy destroys culture. But I think you've done a good job of spelling it out, which is basically that, and we're getting into this with the cathedral, where we're starting to kind of understand this as in almost like a religious type of sense, and that anything that does not align with the religion
Yeah.
um, is therefore sacrilege
Yeah.
and cannot be included. And so, um, you know, America used to be Chevys and apple pie and baseball. And now those things I feel like are treated as part of like this nostalgic past that we are supposed to feel apologetic for in some way, because during that time there were injustices and so any time that there's any sort of injustice that's going on, it like kind of like invalidates whatever was being believed in at that time. And so now the only thing that you can believe in is whatever is on the whatever here at the
Yeah.
present. And
Yeah.
because it is part of that degenerative
Ratchet.
ratchet.
Yeah,
It's a racket too.
for sure.
You never get it back. So
Yeah.
you can only move further in the direction of this religiosity, which means that more and more things, and now I'm starting to relate this to Mark Andreessen's definition of the woke agenda, which is that it just like hates its way out of existence. Like more and more things are disincluded, because fewer and fewer things can be included.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'm
Yeah,
getting that
but
right.
I definitely, and this quote, I have a quote here, in fact, that ties it all together about democracy as presided over by a state religion. But before I read it, though, I just want to say, even that America of apple pies, though, I think that falls within the age of control of public opinion. That in
Oh, for
itself, yeah,
sure.
that
That
in
was
itself is
Edward
another
Bernays,
picture.
I would
Right.
assume.
Yeah. And the creation of the mass consumer as this thing we now needed to have in order to drive the economy after World War II. We
Yep.
needed people to consume. You have all of the engines of war shut down. You have all this excess productive capacity. We need to supply it to someone. So we create the mass consumer. Everybody needs to have the house, the apple pies, and this picture of you need the car in the garage and everything, whatnot. To this quote, though, I think summarizes what we've been talking about very well. Democracy is a ratchet mechanism that successively distances the political realm from feedback sensitivity due to its character as a closed loop or state church sensitive only to a public opinion it has itself manufactured, which we've been talking about.
Mhm.
Yeah. This Up to this point, though, it's not to say that it's a critique of democracy, but it's not to say yet that there's something better than democracy. Again, we're describing what land is doing in a lot of things is describing reality. It could be that this is the best
Yeah.
thing we could have
The
hoped for,
cleanest
too.
dirty
The
shirt.
cleanest, like,
Yeah.
and that's what people say, like, democracy is the best system except for or what is it? It's the worst
It's the
system
worst system except for all the other ones.
except for all the
Yeah.
other
Or
ones.
like
So,
the I've heard the quote like, money is a terrible way to measure a man's worth. It's just better than all. It's the only one we have.
yeah. So
You
this
know,
critique of
same
democracy,
type of thing.
if you feel like disgusted, if we've all been indoctrinated into the faith of democracy. I mean, take this critique as what it is, which is just a good faith description of one person's perception of how things have been operating. But I mentioned the cathedral, this state church. The cathedral is a term that Land gets from Mencius Moldbug or Curtis Yarvin. And the idea is the cathedral is the opinion creation apparatus that is what is creating or manufacturing that reality within a democratic system instead of so that the system is then measuring a reality that it creates. The cathedral is what creates that reality. It is the identification, as we've been talking about, of governance with public relations, the political response to the crisis, the public perception of the crisis is now the crisis itself.
Yeah.
If you've ever, if you get the sense sometimes that when something bad happens, the government is scrambling not to address the underlying causes, but to cover it up
Yeah.
or to describe it to us in terms to misdirect our angst away from our anger away from the causes of it into something that they can control or that, is going to redescribe the crisis in another way for those in power to keep and maintain their power.
Yeah, the crisis is not the crisis. The crisis is that people notice.
Yeah,
And
exactly. Yeah.
that's what they manage, is that they manage that people are perceiving a crisis, and the solution is not to resolve the crisis. The solution is to change the perception.
How dare you notice?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that type of thing too.
Yeah.
And even sometimes it's in as vulgar as that, like political correctness is a way to, oh, you're using the wrong terms to talk about something. You're noticing a dynamic that makes you a racist, a sexist, a bigot, or an anti-democratic fascist. If you just describe a critique of democracy, then you become a fascist, right? You can close down the whole debate through the public relations of calling something by a bad name.
It's Walter in The Big Lebowski. You're not wrong. You're just an asshole. And it's
Yeah,
like, what?
that's
Hold
it.
on. The important part here is that you're not wrong.
Yes, yep. Yeah. So it's called the cathedral because it is the state church promoting the state religion, the state faith, which is democracy in the West, which is certain progressive values. It operates primarily through the media. We've all seen the way the mainstream media operates. That's not a critique that needs to be elaborated, I don't think. Academia, the way that and even just education more broadly speaking, the way that it is designed to inculcate people in the state faith. I mean, we even talk about it nakedly as such, a civic education, right? We want people to believe and feel certain things, so we design our curricula to make them have certain faith principles held as unquestionable.
Because why else would you die for the country?
Yeah,
And why else would you fight for it?
yeah. Um, So I already mentioned this. The cathedral works in part through things like political correctness, fascist and racist then become terms designated as kind of path blockers to get people from going down following a certain line of inquiry, developing certain notions or policies.
How dare you notice?
Yeah, they
Yeah.
mark, Land puts it, they mark unthinkable wastes. They're invocations of the sacred in its negative or limiting sense. I thought that was an interesting, even reflection on the sacred. When you call something sacred, you're also saying you can't do certain things in relation to it, that it's heresy or sacrilege, right?
Yeah.
And so if you define something as sacred, then it becomes something that you can't do certain things in relation to without being burnt at the stake.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it would be sacrilege.
Yes.
Yeah. I want to read the cathedral is an information system, even an intelligence system, that is characterized through supreme irony by a structural inability to learn. So that's what the cathedral is. It's an information system that cannot learn. The minimal requirement is that it displays a radical deficiency of significant feedback links to the control core.
Yeah.
Every apparatus of information gathering occupies a strictly subordinate position relative to the cathedral layer. The cathedral is a structure of read-only memory. It is essentially write protected. The whole of its power and also its vulnerability is inextricable from this feature. It is pure cultural genetics and zero pragmatics. I just thought that that was a cool
Read that last
thing.
part again.
The last line is, or the last two,
Mhm.
the whole of its power and also its vulnerability is inextricable from its feature, the feature of being right protected, that it's read only, that you cannot put new ideas into it, that it does not take feedback. Um, and the last line is, it is pure cultural genetics
Yeah.
and zero pragmatics.
Right. And so, like, again, that's what this all boils down to for me. Zero pragmatics, zero focus on the reality of the situation, and all focus on culture, something that humans can create, ideology, religion, all these things. We focus on what we can control and mold instead of the thing that we're terrified of, which is reality itself, which is imbued with certain principles of spontaneous generation of orders that might not be amenable to what we want or what certain people in power may want. For example, like again, the trichotomy, you have principles either of providence, genetics and evolution, or Cadillac. So you have these generative principles which are going to pragmatically cause a reality. And so the only thing that the cathedral can do is scramble and work in the with kind of the medium it has, which is the generation of culture, to shame us out of certain outcomes, or by a certain mental control, just like make us unable to perceive them as such,
Mhm.
I guess.
To put them just completely off limits, where you just
Yes.
like, it knows that these are the things that will kill it, and therefore it precludes you from accessing them. You can't talk about um, one race being more intelligent than the other, even though it's like that's measurable. Like, and we also like we have no problem like, oh, this one race is taller. This one race has bigger penises. This one race is better athletes. And so,
Right.
but it's like there's one thing you can't apply. And so, like that thing, or like um, the idea that one religion may be better than the others, or that maybe no religion is better.
And there's not even like better, it's
Like,
just like more
yeah,
suited to certain outcomes.
yeah,
For example, some religions are going to be have different relationships to science, for example. Like maybe it might be the case that we have our modern notion of science due to certain cultural or religious traits that allowed a relationship to the truth to flourish in a certain geographic place at a certain time, and then generates modern science. Like,
yeah.
yeah.
We're in a plane going down, and there are parachutes that we're not allowed to access. And the reason we're not allowed to access them, he talks about this, is that the only way to escape this is through exit.
Yeah.
That voice doesn't work because of the degenerative rat
Yeah,
trap,
and,
right?
and you Lucas, you mentioned race. As soon as you begin to talk about that, you begin like, the word racist is the path blocker.
Yeah,
And when we say race, if we say certain races tend to have certain characteristics, again, this is over like a bell curve distribution. It's
yeah,
not to say one person, if you are of this race, you are therefore smarter than everybody of another race. It's to say, no, maybe we can,
yeah.
again, over a bell curve distribution, measure that certain have like a standard deviation or whatever.
And it's not something like I mean, of course, now we have to qualify it, but it's not something I believe. Like, I truly believe that we all came from probably the first two people, and so we're all related. We're all from the same cloth, and so even though there are differences, it's like environmental.
Yeah.
It's environmental and cultural differences. It has nothing to do with your genes.
And in
It's
fact,
just environment. It's like
yeah,
these places have valued things differently.
we're all bony fish in Land's terms. He talks about this in cladistics, where evolution proceeds like you have a trunk and then it branches out. You can also trace us all back to that same trunk.
Yeah.
And we're all still holding within us our evolutionary heritage. We all came from bony fish.
Ugly bags of water, I heard humans described as today.
That's not
Ugly
bad.
bags of water.
Yeah, I like that. So the cathedral then is about deceit. which is something that we saw in Samson's book, Our Tribal Future, and also in Soft War, that humans really aren't evolved to deal with deceit. Um, there's one of the things guiding human evolution was the problem of who we can trust. That once we get beyond our family, out to friends, and then out to tribes, we have to find ways to trust people who have reason to deceive us and manipulate us. And so we're really not built for the society where we live in, where we can simply be lied to. To quote Land, there is no precedent for an intolerant, precisely coded system of belief trending to a totalitarian form while presenting itself as inevitable progress towards general disillusionment. This cathedral, this state religion, it's not something that we evolved to imagine, to like be able to resist, right? That there
Hmm.
could be something that we are downstream of as far as eating the culture that it creates and living within the kind of the reality that it generates. What it does is it divorces getting what you want from the feeling of getting what you want. So if you can create in people the feeling that they got what they want, then they don't actually have to get what they want. And the analogy he uses the phrase wireheading. Wireheading is this philosophical experiment that it's like being in the Matrix. If you can put a wire into someone's head and generate all of the sensations they would have, you can just give them the sensation that they want without giving them the thing. You don't
Yep.
have to be eating a real delicious steak. You can just wirehead into somebody the sensation
Hmm.
that they're eating the delicious steak. And that's kind of what the cathedral does as a form of mind control. It wireheads into you the perception that you're getting what you want. It's that the deceit is that kind of essential and foundational. And to bring this back to Bitcoin realm to something we understand from that perspective, the one of the initial points of this was the demetallization of money, a pure signal of wealth entirely disconnected from the extravagance of physical reality. Once you can remove the underlying gold that backs something, then you can just have pure signal of wealth, which can be
Wire-headed wealth.
we can be wire-headed wealth.
Okay.
Like that's what fiat is. It wireheads into us credit, like credit expansion, wireheads into us the feeling that we're getting wealthier without the underlying reality that we're actually generating, underlying productivity or something like that.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, Keynesianism, or Keynesianism, however you pronounce it, in its essence is wirehead economics, to quote Land, focusing on the policy question, how do we best deliver the stim?
Best the stimulation.
The stim, he
Okay.
says the stim, but like
Yeah.
stimulus, and that's like
Yeah.
also the stim is, imagine it kind of as like a stimulant
Yeah.
and that's kind of how Keynesians think, right?
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so then you mentioned this, the next point then, exit over voice. So, public opinion, we've seen the democracy utilizes the cathedral to manage and create a reality rather than to respond to reality as it is. Public opinion in this way doesn't provide feedback in a democracy because it is modifiable. Exit then is what matters. If we imagine that there's exit, voice, and loyalty, I think this is the framework of Albert Hirschman, at least as described by biology.
I was going to say, I only know it from biology.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask you,
So to say, I think it's exit, voice, and loyalty is the Hirschman framework. He might have had he certainly did, a more complex framework, but since then, I think it's kind of been bastardized down into one of those. Within a political system, you can either exercise voice, you can like speak up and try to change things.
Yeah.
You can exercise loyalty, you can just be loyal to the system regardless, or you can exercise exit and just leave the system. And so neo-reaction is about exit over voice.
Yeah.
And Land doesn't mention loyalty, but I think that actually the framework works better if you say exit, voice, or loyalty. Because sometimes people do say, I know my voice doesn't matter. I'm not going to leave, though. I have a sense of patriotism or a sense of fealty. And this can be a very pure sentiment, too. I don't discount this as bad because I feel this way about like where I'm from, Kansas.
yeah, you
which
feel that way, but you don't know that you would feel that way devoid of your civic programming, do you?
No, and you can't ever
Like there's
consider.
not it's not testable.
I wouldn't even be a human without civic programming.
Yeah.
Like the narratives that we're a part of constitute our world. And you're never going to have an absence of a narrative that you didn't choose. I mean, this is Alistair McIntyre's so Nick Land and Alistair McIntyre are kind of the two poles of philosophy that I really draw from. Um, McIntyre's more an explicit ethicist, and Nick Land just kind of goes around ethics to describe, more broadly speaking, how reality is and embraces the consequences. Coldness be my God. Like he's just going to say, this is the way the world is. These are dynamics under which we operate. And so within that, so Alistair McIntyre, just to summarize his philosophy in a sentence, if you want to know what you should do in life, you need to ask yourself, what stories am I a part of? The stories always precede who we are, and we don't generate our own stories. We can participate in their authorship, but you always are in the world in media res. You always enter a system that was already there, and you have to operate within that. And I like loyalty, the notion of loyalty, because at a certain self-reflective level, you begin to look at your narratives and sort amongst them, and certain of them you have to decide are worthy of loyalty. Certain of your stories are stories you're like, I didn't choose to be a protagonist in this particular story. I didn't choose to be like maybe a son or, these like familiar relations to these specific people.
Mhm.
I didn't choose to have these coworkers or these people I grew up with who are now kind of people I know really well, but you still have to determine your relationship to your past. And loyalty, I think, is a response, a valid response that people can have. Or you can exit voice, try to change things, especially with thinking about political systems, that story, or exit and leave those things. But just to get back to Neo Reaction, then exit over voice. Um, the Land is really dismissive of all activism and protest. To quote Land, angry antagonism has no useful place. On the largest scale, evil is best punished by abandonment. So again, if the system is bad enough, you don't try to engage with it, because what you're engaging with is something that's creating opinion, not listening. It's not a feedback mechanism you can argue with and give your feedback to. It is telling you what feedback it wants. And if you don't give it that feedback, it doesn't matter to it. That's the way the cathedral operates. That's the
Yeah.
way that democracy as a degenerative ratchet operates.
Kind of makes the point that all activism, that like activism is only allowed if it's within the box of what the cathedral wants to hear.
If it's a performance of the
Yeah.
feedback that it wants.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely. Activism is a form of dependence. It depends on sympathetic political toleration in order to exist and for change to occur. If you're thinking that your protest led to a political change, that's the change that was preordained, that the system already wanted, and the protest was allowed to blossom or created. Think about what happened after, the summer of Floyd and the summer of love there, all those protests and the burning and the rioting and whatnot. That was allowed to happen because the cathedral wanted the result that that would lead to.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the protest wasn't an organic thing.
Yeah.
It was only organic in the sense that it was allowed to grow. People kind of set loose and, we want the result this is going to lead to. So here's the theater. Now go act it out. Here's
Yeah.
your script.
Yeah. There's more than enough evidence, I think, to point to that was not necessarily it was certainly not organic. Maybe it started organically, but the proliferation of it was definitely not. I have a friend who has video showing the riots in New York City, and he said like it was just so organized, like big box trucks driving up, guys in charge standing in the back. Like they brought the people there. And they had like certain stores that they would go to. Like it was, it was just like, it was not this utter chaos. And I'm sure that there were instances that it was, but like within that, there were, either people driving it or they maybe were just opportunists that were really prepared. But that had, they had a map and a game plan,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. And it just doesn't even have, maybe it was that programmed, that controlled, but it doesn't even have to be that controlled. It can just be that we know that people are going to act in a certain way. And so we're going to let them act in a certain way because we want this result
Yeah.
that we know that the way that they act is going to lead to. So exit, though, then is anti-dialectical. It is an option against argument. So if you can't argue with the cathedral, then what you have to do is leave. And so to quote Land, let's spatialize our disagreement is an alternative is an alternative to resolution in time. If you can't solve an argument dialectically, then you spatialize your disagreement. One side goes to one place, the other side goes to another place, and then the disagreement then is embodied in reality as a thing existing and another thing existing instead of the two things trying to resolve themselves into a conclusion that they're never going to come to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't find well, and it makes sense when you so the quote you can't reason somebody out of something that they weren't reasoned into, and
Yeah.
that's what morals are, right? Because if we were following like reason, or we're following like result of catallaxy, result of the market, or result of unfettered interaction between parties, then we wouldn't need morals. But morals are something that we impose on top of that, and he um it helps, like he gives this definition, like we think of progressivism. We think of this idea of progressivism as like, oh, this is the thing that makes things better. This is the thing that
Progress,
or
right.
it's progress. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Progressivism is escalators over stairs, and stuff like that. But he defines it as like progressivism is placing morals above intelligence, above intelligence, virtues over facts. It really emphasizes victimhood. And this is not a direct quote. This is something that I paraphrase, but guilt is like just guilt. To think about guilt is basically like a white people thing. He kind of defined like the way that we think about this in terms
Yeah.
of like victimhood. It's ethnomasochism.
Mhm.
Like I hate myself, and the more I hate myself, the better of a person I am. This Puritan cleansing of all of the sins of
Yeah.
of my forefathers and stuff. But it was there because he brings up the Hagenal line, west of the Hagenal. I think I'm saying that right. Hagenal line in Europe. That's where this progressivism came out of, and it was in that region that feudalism arose. Feudal agriculture, manorial manor agriculture, where things are spread out, and you had to take care of the other people around you, and so this developed this like kind of like obligation to take care of other people. That it's not like it's great. We think it's great. We think it's a great thing to be like, oh, I feel obliged to help other people. But when you instantiate that into your government, that becomes um it becomes victimhood, and it becomes taking from one and giving to the other. And it had all of these interesting, especially to like what David Sampson talked about, like with like kind of the de-evolution of our culture, is that people in these systems, they marry later, they had fewer kinship connections, they have fewer children, and they were more likely to have the nuclear family, which again is something that we, I think, have been maybe programmed to think of as good. But the way Samson describes it is that nuclear is like, it's too small to live. Like the
Yeah.
nuclear family cannot live. You have to have, your camp. You have to have your 17 people or whatever it is minimum,
Mhm.
in order to push about the world and move forward. So,
Yeah. No,
anyways,
that interesting thing on that, what you're saying about the Hagenal line or whatever, there's a very funny essay in here. It's with a lot of land, it's half tongue in cheek, I think, and half really trying to say something important. And he kind of imagines critical whiteness studies. He's like, why there? So if you're scared of white nationalism, just realize a white nationalism is a contradiction. It's because white privilege is a white idea, right?
yeah, yeah,
Like that's ethnomasochism is an
yeah,
expression of whiteness
yeah.
in a sense, like philosophically. And he has a quote from Alison Bailey, who is a feminist leftist philosopher, discussing how Western philosophy is permeated by universalism, but that universalism is the kind of exactly the thing that generates like the whiteness that she associate or the universalism that she associates with whiteness is exactly the thing that generates white ethnomasochism, like white privilege,
Mhm.
like the universalization of white guilt as this thing over the whole white race or whatever. And
Yeah.
so like white nationalism is a contradiction because it is whiteness that has led to the hatred of whiteness as a thing and
Yeah.
kind of this like weird.
Hating white people is a pretty much of an exclusively white thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
That's funny.
yeah. And not
Anxiety
wrong.
sucks.
So, we don't expect any other race to become self-hating in the way, you have someone said, I forget who says this, you have like Chicano studies. What's that about? Like
Yeah.
it's about the good things that
Uh-huh.
the like Hispanic people have to
Uh-huh.
offer. Black study, it's about
Yeah.
the good things that black
Yeah.
people have done, whatever. White studies, is that about the
All about slavery. All about
it's about
slavery
the
and
list
beating
the
wives,
list of things, the
yeah,
list of horrors that white
grabbing
people have done.
asses.
Yeah, that type of thing.
Yep.
So basic tenets that of neo-reaction. This is kind of where we got so far, I think. So first, democracy is unable to control government. It's not a feedback reading mechanism, but a feedback creating mechanism. It leads to degenerative ratchets. Egalitarianism is incompatible with liberty is another thing that he mentions.
Define egalitarianism, because I
Mhm.
know it, but I know a lot of people don't. So
Yeah,
it's basically like it's just like the opportunity for everybody to have the same result.
it's just the belief that everybody's equal.
Yeah.
And so if you hear that, you're like, well, of course everybody's equal. I mean, obviously everybody's not equal.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the most, if you can't just see that in reality, and there's in a sense nothing more that can be said to you.
Yeah.
If you don't just automatically see that we're not the same height, we're not the same um inherent ability to do everything, to play a musical instrument, to play a sport, we're not the same level of attractiveness physically. We don't have the same dulcet tone to our voice. Humans are inherently unequal.
Yeah.
And egalitarianism, to the extent that it's just the statement that we are all equal, that becomes incompatible with liberty because you then have to get rid of liberty in order to make sure that people are equal. Like
Yeah.
you have to get rid of the expressions of inequality that comes from letting people act freely
Yeah.
in a free market. You got to say, yeah.
There's two examples of this I think people can relate to, or at least they're the ones that are most prominent in my life, which is there are good-looking people, and then there are people that when they're in public, other people stare, and
Yeah.
they're like, "Who are you?"
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you're like, it's like, oh, everybody's like, oh, there's zeros to tens, and they're like, and then there's whatever this is, and then the other thing is athletes. Like, I played sports, you played sports,
Mhm.
reasonably fit, you're reasonably fit. Um, I've been around athletes,
Right.
and when I'm around an athlete, I'm like, oh, you're a different breed. You're something else. You're not me. Like
Yeah.
I tried out for a minor league baseball team, or like an independent league baseball team, which would be like the lowest rung of minor leagues. And I was like a decent high school athlete. I was not great, but I was decent. I was better. I was the best baseball player in a couple counties, probably, small counties. And I got up there and I started throwing. And then this other guy steps up, and remember, like, we're both trying to get a job that probably pays as much as bagging groceries. Like, this is literally the
Yeah.
lowest rung, right? And he's 6'5", 230 pounds, and just rocketing the ball. And I'm like, oh, I saw him throw one pitch, and I was like, I'm going home. Like, well, what's the point of me being
Yeah.
here? Like, I like, until you put yourself up against truly different, and intelligence is the same way. Sitting next to biology and talking with biology, like, it's so clear how much smarter this person is than me.
Yeah, maybe they
You
got
know?
more RAM, more throughput, whatever parameter mentally they have, it's just different.
Yeah, and you're like, yeah, it's kind of like where I don't want to play games with Michael. I don't want to play basketball with Michael Jordan. It's like, you don't want to have a debate with biology. Like, you don't,
Yeah.
you don't want to be in a beauty contest with Shakira or whoever, whatever.
Yeah.
So anyway, sorry, that's a
No,
digression.
I mean, that's a good explanation of why egalitarianism is a
Yeah.
religious sentiment.
Yeah.
And it's explicitly a religious sentiment. I mean, there's in a sense, there's nothing quote unquote wrong with it if you understand it as a religious sentiment. Like Christianity is a form of egalitarianism. We each have a soul. We're each possessed of an inherent moral dignity and worth.
Everyone's deserving of love.
Like,
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah. And so it's just, you need to understand it as a religious sentiment. And in our modern world, we tend not to. We tend to be both atheist and egalitarian, which is I mean, that's just not compatible. Like, atheism is not compatible with egalitarianism. You have to accept it on
Yeah,
religious faith
that's a
that
good
we're
point.
equal, or you're just making up, or you're trying to again control that equality or dictate it by removing liberty, or there's the what does equity mean, that famous image of like the three people watching the baseball game of different heights, and if you want everybody to have the same outcome, then you really need to
Yeah,
re-engineer reality, right?
yeah.
Give take from the people, because it's always the case that if you want egalitarianism, you can not only bring up the people that are at the bottom, you can pull down the people that are at the top, right? And you can make people feel ashamed for excelling even,
Mhm.
or prevent them from excelling. So democracy is unable to control government, egalitarian is incompatible with liberty. And then the third principle or basic tenet of neo-reaction is neo-reaction is the socio-political solutions offered by it are ultimately based on exit. Again, we just talked about that. Not about engagement with the system, but spatializing your disagreement. If you're in disagreement with the system, you leave the system. To quote Land, it is the outside working through fragmentation that rules, and no other authority has any standing.
Yeah, change is not possible within the cathedral of democracy. The only solution is secession
Yep,
slash exit. You
good.
can't, because of like we keep, it's great. I think it's great how you've structured this, because we're able to keep drawing lines back to the degenerative ratchet
Yeah.
and giving examples.
Yeah. And again, this is all playing with the idea of neo-reaction in different ways to playing with it as based on different strands around what spontaneous or different principles of spontaneous order or different names we give to spontaneous order. Again, is it God? Is it evolution? Is it catallaxy? I'm talking about it as an exit from a system rather than engagement with a system. Another way is kind of just looking at the word itself. Land at one point breaks down neo-reaction, neo and reaction. So you have like neo, new, towards the future, reaction, some sort of response to the past, a focus on the past. And he breaks down reaction, progressivism, and conservatism. So reaction then is the future and the past aligned against the present. You're looking at the past as a way that things maybe were before they degenerated into the present, and the future as a way that things could be if principles of spontaneous order were allowed to generate reality instead of us trying to mold reality. That's reaction. Progressivism is the present and the future against the past. The progressives want to say the past was ruin and racism, bigotry, all these horrible things were in the past. The present is good to the extent that it's oriented towards the future, towards an idea of progress. And then conservatism is the present and the past against the future. To quote Buckley as a famous quote, the conservative stands athwart history and says stop, something like that. They're kind of romantic, nostalgic. They're looking towards the past, towards make America great again, that type of sentiment.
Mm.
But again, how it's different conservatism than neo-reaction is the the neo-reactionary, so to speak, is looking at the past and seeing that, if before you have these different types of degenerative ratchets, things were better in that sense, but also looking towards the future, not trying to be like the conservative and to saying, no, we can turn back the ratchet. The neo-reactionary says the nature of the ratchet is that you can't turn it backwards. We
Yeah.
can't reverse history. We can only go towards the future. And that becomes a task of understanding the strands of fate that are going to lead us there, whether providence, catallaxy, or evolution, heredity, something like that.
So the main difference between conservatism, I guess, writ large,
Yeah.
yeah, and neo-reactionism is that conservatism believes that they can change the system, and neo-reactionism,
Change it to bring it towards the past, to realign with what was
yeah,
good in the past
yeah,
and lost.
yeah,
Yeah.
and neo-reactionism says that there, like, change cannot occur, that um, you must start anew.
I would say it's that we need to understand that change will occur regardless of what we do.
Hmm.
And we need to understand the dynamics, the underlying
That weird.
principles of spontaneous generation that will lead to the future. I almost see neo reaction again, not as a normative view about what the future should be. It's land saying, this is what the future is going to be.
Correct. Yeah,
Yeah,
this is very nothing stops this train is
exactly that type of
esque.
thing. And all of this, I have no idea. It's just me thinking through Xenosystems. I don't want to say that I'm representing Land's view
Yeah.
as if it is Land's view, right? It's this whole book is an exercise in the stimulation of thought. And read it, get your own ideas. It will give you many. And
It
I,
will it will give you nightmares.
yeah,
I
right.
yeah, last night I
To the
laid it
extent you understand it, it should.
yeah, last night I laid in bed and I started uploading a bunch of stuff to Grok, and then I turned it on to voice mode, and I just started having a conversation with it,
Yeah.
and it was hilarious because I just kept like it's like it's basically like trying to convince me that things are going to be okay,
Yeah.
even though things are not going to be okay.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, come on, man. It'll I mean, it might not work out that way. I was like, what are the odds? And he's like, 5% maybe.
Yeah.
Like, shit.
That's the most Landian way to engage with this essay is to do it with an AI partner talking to them
Nice.
and
I did it
seeking
right.
comfort from them.
I
Yeah.
did it right.
No, man, when I first read Land,
Did you
2012,
go into like a depressive funk for six
in a
months?
sense,
Yeah.
because I actually, at the time, I had dropped out of the practice of law and I was teaching philosophy. So I
Mhm.
went really deep into just different thought tunnels, warrens, like the rabbit hole in the broad sense of like, no, I'm going to rethink things. And Land at the time represented a form of nihilism that was like it was difficult to see how it was not going to pan out according to the vision that he laid out, right? And I spent probably 2 to 3 years plotting my own reaction to Land, and I wrote an essay called Insideness. He had a his handle was Outsideness, and the whole idea was like if the reservoir is this or if the outside is this reservoir of kind of uncontained chaos that we're spinning towards, if it's reality unmediated by human perception, and that reality is grotesque and only mediated in its abstraction by our ideas of horror, as we're going to talk about later, like what resources do we have against that? And I was pulling from at the time a lot of Young and like things that were about movements inward and about how you can find through different types of practices meaning within a purely human framework. And
Yeah.
but again, yeah, I think anybody reading Land, if you read it diligently and kind of open yourself up to it, you're going to have a reaction and you're going to try to find a way to insulate yourself from the conclusions.
Yeah, because actually not nihilist. He is, right? I mean, he's not necessarily nihilist. He's just trying to say, look, this is what is.
Yes.
And I'm not going to impose my thoughts on that, or I'm just going to try to show you what the clearest look of this is.
Yeah.
Um, and anyway, yeah, to jump to the end, it's like the idea that AI with robotics is going to um, pair with Bitcoin and capitalism is going to reach escape velocity when it achieves autonomous capital, which means that we just don't need to be involved in the system anymore. And he's pointing out that we are the ghosts in the machine, that we are the errors that need removed and need corrected. And by the way, like this is I think a perfect example of this is you could not find a person less nihilistic than Jeff Booth, who we just interviewed.
Mhm.
And this is what Jeff says. Like, look, humans are the errors in the system. They will be removed from the system. And out of that will be something that he believes is beautiful
Yeah.
and wonderful and abundance and everything. And so, yeah, I just like, I got stuck on it for a little bit because I was like, oh, I'm bummed out. Like, humans are going to be pets, or we're just not going to be around. Everybody's going to mold with computers. We're going to have Neuralinks. I don't know. Maybe that's better. Maybe it's not. I have no idea. Like, we're just so trained as humans to believe that whatever we are now is the best we could be, and that's just truly not the case,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah. I mean, it's trying to stand in the middle of the river that is time, that is evolution, that is whatever principle of spontaneous order, and trying to say, stop, this is the end of history. Like, that's what
yeah,
we want to do as humans. We
yeah,
want to be safe and say, we've arrived at a point, I want no further change. And like, that's what the cathedral is kind of designed to do. You'll only get change, but it's going to be in the form of like cool shit you can buy. it's not gonna be something that will change you and maybe get rid of you or show that you're not necessary in your current form in a
Yeah.
certain sense. Yeah.
And we also have this we also have this thing we do as humans, which is to assume that wherever we are in the present moment, that we're dealing with the sum total of all the knowledge that will ever be, and that the best theories that we have now are the best theories that will ever be.
Yeah.
And um and so that's why, if you can remember that, we used to bleed people with leeches, and we used to drill holes in people's heads, and um you know maybe we burned some witches, or who knows, maybe we checked if they floated, all this other stuff, um that we're probably not at the end of understanding things. And so, just like, I guess, like a caveat or a warning to anybody who gets into this, and they, like I do, got a little bummed out for a bit. That's how I got myself out of it, was I realized that, oh, we're not at the end of human anything. And that, this actually may be the best that we have right now. Maybe it's not. But we're moving somewhere. And I think one thing we've realized as humans is that, um, we do have the capacity for change, and we can always, like, change it. Maybe this says that we don't, but
Yeah.
who knows?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and one positive thing in the reaction I'll say is he makes this point which I had not thought about before. Um, so neo-reaction neo-reaction describes a reality that is based on spontaneous ordering, which we can describe as fate or destiny. Um, and which can be a negative thing, because once you take away human agency from the picture, like what world do we serve? We can't change the future. It's preordained by either providence, evolution, or catallaxy, right? It's out of the keys are not in our hands. But then, like that also, once the keys are not in our hands, that takes away political violence from the picture, because terrorism is a resort to violence by people whose ideas are losing traction. And the
Mhm.
neo-reactionary doesn't seek popular support. They're not trying to put policies into place in any way. They're anti-democratic, right? And so they have no reason to become violent or terrorists. They're not trying to get the populace to believe a certain thing. It's almost a way you can say, if somebody descends into violence based on reading something like this, then you can almost be assured that they've misunderstood it
Correct.
and that they're not neo-reactionaries or whatever other word you might give to describe somebody who pulls to a consummation all the strands of Nick Land's thought.
Yeah. Yeah, these are just it's just he's just saying, "This party sucks, I'm leaving."
Yeah, that's right. X over voice, leave the
Yeah.
party. N- Neo-reactionary, here's another strand. Neo-reaction is social Darwinism. It's an insistence that Darwinism has no limits. It is something we are inside. To quote Land, no part of what it is to be human can ever judge its Darwinian inheritance from a position of transcendent leverage, as if accessing principles of estimation with some alternative genesis or criterion. The implication of this, he says, is that everything of value, and this is the way that Land talks and writes, everything of value has been built in hell. Nature uses incredible cruelty to create. I mean, imagine the way that evolution works. It works by, um, I'll just quote Land, all health, beauty, intelligence, and social grace has been teased from a vast butcher's yard of unbounded carnage, requiring incalculable eons of massacre to draw forth even the subtlest advantages. That's the way that evolution works, right? Like the stuff that doesn't survive goes in the
It's
trash bin of
extinct.
history. It's
It's
extinct,
extinct.
right?
It's no
Yeah.
longer here.
And the
Yeah.
reason that we're healthy right now is because that health has been forged through a process of selection over many thousands of years to make us best suited for our environment. All of our virtues are owed to people who survived because they had those virtues, and those that died off because they did not and did not reproduce, therefore.
Mhm.
Yeah.
This is an interesting one, because conservatism is the one that says we should try to go back to the way that things were, but the progressive would be the one that is trying to resurrect dinosaurs, to go
So
back to the way that things are. I would think. I think that's how I'm thinking. I don't know. In my head, this seems like a contradiction, or it seems like something that's,
yeah, which part seems contradictory?
because the the position of the conservative is to go back to the way that things were, but with the specifics of, like, protecting endangered species, like that, and resurrecting extinct species. These are like, I feel like these are like primarily liberal progressive things, which is returns the way that things were. So anyways, I don't know why. That was
I
probably a
think that
useless
you're
thing to
no, I
say,
think that
but it
you're
was
right,
fun.
and, like, one of the strands of progressivism is it, wanting to freeze in place certain things about the way that reality are rather than letting unleashing forms of spontaneously generated order. Like the
Mhm.
progressive does want to freeze reality in a certain sense, the parts of reality that are not comfortable to it. Like the cathedral again wants to just redescribe reality in a certain way and live in that redescribed reality because it's too uncomfortable to think of capitalism achieving escape velocity and what that might
Yeah,
mean.
yeah. We're just like a kind of a quick note. We're probably about halfway through your notes, right?
Eight of
Little.
25. So
Okay.
yeah,
Um, can we do a summary and then start a second episode?
we sure can. We've
Because
kind of hit the most political aspects of
okay,
neo-reaction, talking about what the notion of a degenerative ratchet as a sort of feedback or a sort of reversal being impossible. Like a ratchet moves
yep.
forward, it clicks, but it can't move backwards. We just talked about what those were. The welfare state, immigration, expansive franchise. These are forms of degenerative ratchets. We learned about the different three strands of neo-reaction, the theonomist, the religious strand, the ethno-nationalist, kind of the ethnic genetics strand, and then the techno-commercial strand.
Clarify. Techno commercial is different from capitalist. How?
No, they're not. It's
Okay.
not. So it's the capitalist strand. If I
Okay.
said,
It's the
yeah,
capitalist trend.
right.
Okay.
There's a religious, the ethnic, and the capitalist strand
Cool.
of
Okay.
neo-reaction. Um, we got the critique of democracy as something whose feedback mechanism is corrupted, and the cathedral is the thing that corrupts that feedback mechanism. It generates the reality that it wants to measure rather than measuring the reality as it actually is. It creates the feedback it desires.
Yeah.
Yeah. We talked about exit over voice. Neo-reaction is about spatializing disagreement, leaving a system instead of pulling yourself into a dialectical engagement with a cathedral that's not interested in any sort of feedback other than what it's preordained and created.
It's not interested in what you have to say, because if it was interested in what you have to
It
say,
would
it would
tell
tell you what you had to say.
you gotta love that honesty, that directness right there. Um, yeah, that's those are the main strands. And
Okay.
something that
So
we've been teasing out too that I really like about this is that each of the three strands has an idea. Each of the trichotomy, the three strands of neo-reaction, embeds an idea of fate, which is also an idea of spontaneous generation of order. Religious being, for the religious people, it's providence, the will of God. For nationalists, ethnic nationalists, people like that, it's evolution, heredity generates the future. And for capitalists, it's catalaxy or self-organizing market system, something like that.
so nothing stops this train.
Yeah.
This train either kills us all, or it takes us to a place where life is not recognizable from what we think it is now, from what we feel like it is now.
That's where we haven't gotten yet. We haven't gotten
Okay.
to accelerate neo-reaction and accelerationism and kind of intelligence optimization and artificial intelligence as super intelligence. That's where we're
Okay.
going.
So I jumped the gun a little bit. But there's three strands of people that want to get off, that want to leave this party because this party sucks. It's religious people, racist people,
Yeah.
and money people,
Yep.
capitalists.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, yeah. And
People who are prevented from speaking essentially within the cathedral because forms of political correctness serve as path blockers. If you're a religious person, you're a theocrat, you're irrational, you want to just, use the will of God in some surrogate for your own desire to control other people. If you're an ethno-nationalist, you're a racist, as you said.
mhm.
And if you're a capitalist,
Which, by the way, is half
techno-commercialist,
of the world. I looked this up. Over half of the population of the world lives in a country that is 85% or more one ethnicity.
yeah.
So, yeah, it's it's one of those things that it's like, you you can only be racist in play. Yeah, this is Andrew Huberman once said that you can't be an alcoholic on an island that has no alcohol. Like, you have to have access to the thing. And by the same token, like, you can't be a racist in a place that has no other races. So if you're Chinese, like you're just Chinese, dude.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it's funny that you can only be racist in places that have other races. It's exclusively reserved to those places, by the
Yeah.
way. So uh,
Luckily, you can still, if you're a bigot, be inegalitarian. You can still,
that's true.
even amongst the Chinese, someone's going to be taller than someone else. Someone's going to be a better singer. So,
Yeah, that's true.
yeah.
That's true. That's good. Okay. And then yeah, and then the cathedral, and the cathedral is the Matrix, and
Yeah.
because
Put it
like
that
he
way.
refers to it, especially as when you think about the movie The Matrix, he says that the cathedral is read only. It's right protected, and the people that are living in the Matrix until they take the pill. Is it the red pill or the blue pill?
Red pill's the one that
That
exposes you
gets you
to
out.
all of reality.
Yeah, the red
Yeah.
pill gets you out. The red pill exposes you to reality. So until you like being red pilled gives you access to right, or at least access to go to a different program, I guess. But being within the matrix, you're in read only. So cathedral, matrix, same thing basically. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're at yeah, nice. All right, cool. That's good. We will continue this right away, but I just want to have like a good place to split the episode because I think we did a really good job of laying the groundwork here. Um, and I want to like I truly want to give justice to this book. Like these are deep thoughts. These are things that are not easy to think about. And it takes courage to consider these things because a lot of these things that we are talking about are within the realm of those which are designated as verboten by the cathedral, and therefore we're not supposed to talk about them. And it is a act of terrorism, or it is a act of courage to even brave your way into the idea of not participating in
Yeah,
democracy.
even having like a minor fourth tier podcast to talk about race in any sense on it's terrifying because I mean we're kind of
Fourth tier. Who are we? We have made leaps, my
I
friend.
know. Well, there's like how many tiers of how many
I stood up
circles
here
of hell are there in
thinking we were double digits.
Dante's Inferno? So like it's all a hellish landscape out there if you're doing so. But no, even to talk about race in any sense, even it's even kind of pseudo public,
Yeah.
we kind of escaped the worst of cancel culture for the
Yeah, I
point
think so.
being. But you just have to have like a level of precision in your language, a number of asterisks and qualifications that you feel you need to get out to say anything, and we trip over ourselves and we just stay quiet because we're afraid that we might say something in the wrong way where we haven't expressed the correct qualification about statistical probabilities and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So
it's like there was there was this experiment done with people in a lobby. And they put people in a lobby and they start pumping smoke and the smell of like something burning into the room. And they find that the more people are in the room, the longer it takes anybody to stand up and say something,
yeah.
to the point where it's like people are like keeling over. You can't see across the room. And nobody has yet said, hey, something's wrong. Like
It
we should do something.
it takes a
You know,
hero to yell fire in a crowded theater.
it really does. Yeah. And so that's the thing is like we've been so bred to be like, again, like the crisis is not the crisis. The crisis is noticing the crisis, and it takes
Yeah.
courage to notice the crisis. So,
Yeah.
yeah. All right. We're going to press pause. We're going to get back and we're going to start another one. Thank you for joining us for the first round of our talk on Nick Land's Xenosystems. Grant, you look handsome today.
Thank you,
Nice
sir.
work. All right. I'm going to piss.